part of the fact that the Freedom Party lost so many seats is because their attempt in government doesn't seem to have worked very well, and they've ended up being punished by the electorate. So I think the interesting thing about this is there's not really much more to say than that. Is just, does this mean when these populists get into power that the electorate is similarly has a short attention span for those guys, as it does seems to for the main parties at the moment? And then kind of like, where do we go after that, right? I just thought it was interesting that, there's a kind of a bit of a pushback on the rise of populism, and we've got this progressive centre seems to have held in Holland and succeeded this time. So,
yeah, it's almost like, is this the start of a new trend or the canary in the coal mine, or is it just a one-off?
Populists still come second, but it's just, having tried them in government, the Dutch electorate seems to have punished them. Has punished them, because I think they lost like 15, 16 seats for that failure. So it's kind of like, I think this is the thing with Reform. So if Reform do win the next election, and they are governing in parts of the UK now as well, at local level, but if they do win next time, and, have the same issues will still be there, right? All the same challenges. How much is the public how much leeway is the public really going to give them until they just end up being like all the others? And just, you failed as well, so we're going to boot you guys out. Anyway,
I think as well, by the time the populist parties get elected, the electorate is usually like really low on patience. That's why they've done it.
Yeah,
they've already gone on a bit of a journey in order to do that, and then they don't expect to have a really long time to deliver what they thought you were going to deliver. And the more vague their expectations, the harder that is, because if you basically say to everybody, whatever your version of this is what we're going to give you, we're literally exactly the definition of populism, basically, then there's an awful lot of room for disappointment.
Yeah, and then what's the snapback, right? So what is the snapback? Is the snapback to the centre, to progressive politics, or is it to something even further right? And that's a bit that I find interesting, or like, or just to where people just give up on the system altogether and we end up with violence or whatever. That's always been my concern about, if you have a, failed Conservative government followed by a failed Labour government followed by a failed Reform government, what comes next? Well, in Holland, they had this kind of attempt with the populists, and the snapback seems to have been to the centre and to this kind of, because the Christian Democrats did quite well as well. So anyway, I just thought it's interesting that it's not all marching one way. So you got Czech Republic going this way, and that still seems to be the direction of travel in Europe, is towards populism. And in Holland, a little bit of a snapback at the moment. So anyway, there we are.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Okay. Well, we'll keep an eye on it, because they still got to they got to stitch together a coalition. And I think it's an interesting observation. We should note that, though, like, it wasn't not a landslide win for the progressive.
Oh God, no. Well, look, 15 parties got elected, right? But most of them moderates, right? Because the third and fourth place parties were the Christian Democrats, the centre left, the general centrists. So, who also had good results. But it's, they've still got to form a government, and the populists still came a strong second.